Welcome back, everybody. We are continuing with our Tamiya MF-01X chassis build, picking up on step 12. I have opened RC parts bag B and sorted everything out. So let's get started. First, step 12 is the differential for the rear gearbox. It goes together exactly like the one for the front gearbox. Or excuse me, the one for the front gearbox goes together like the one for the rear gearbox. Just check it, make sure everything's rotating freely. And that's done. We'll move on to step 13. And we want our right front chassis half where we mounted our servo. Need one of these little cups. This is part F7 from the plastic parts tree F, which is the one molded in red. We want to pop a little bearing in there, and then we want to press that down inside of the chassis half. Make sure it presses down in there all the way. Alright, and then our spur gear is listed as part G1. Bearing on both sides. Make sure it's seated all the way down. Alright, and then we have our gear shaft. And we're going to put a little grease on everything. Again, you don't have to coat it 100% because it'll get spread out. We want to seat that down in. Like that. And we have our idler gear. It's the same thing, bearing in each side. Shorter shaft. We want to put a little grease on that. And then drop him down in. Spin them a little bit. Alright. I want to set this guy aside for a couple minutes. Being careful that we don't drop those parts out of it. And we have the left side of the front gearbox. First thing we want to do is get our battery support on. This is basically a duplicate of the other half. Get these screws in here. There we go. Down. If you have any questions or comments or anything, please feel free. I will respond to them. as soon as possible. Okay, that's a little small spot for my big finger. There we go. That's in. Now we have another F7, the little red bearing cup. Pop the bearing into that. Press it down in, and then press it into the chassis half. You'll hear it pop. You'll know when it goes all the way in there. It's kind of snug. Alright, that is step 14. On step 15, we're going to bring the two halves together. We're going to drop our diff in. Put some grease on that. Place. Alright, make sure you bring your steering rod out through the hole in the side of the chassis. And just slide everything together. And everything seems to fit like it should, which is good. Before we put any screws in, we want to take one of our drive cups, slide it in there, get everything lined up here. You might have to take a small screwdriver and kind of move the differential a little bit, get it to line up. Everything is rotating freely. We can move that. And we have 3 screws to hold this together. These are the 3x10s, self-tapping screws. Started here. And that one's way down in there. Slow them down. There you go. Again, check, make sure everything's rotating freely. Everything is moving like it's supposed to. Excuse me. Alright. Now here is where the wheelbase For this Suzuki Jimny, we're using the medium wheelbase 225 millimeter. And this is where this starts to get important. It shows you short wheelbase, medium wheelbase, and long wheelbase. And the parts you need to bring the chassis, the two gearboxes together, are going to vary depending on that wheelbase. So for our purposes, for the medium wheelbase Suzuki Jimny, we need parts B3, B4, B10, and B11. That's these plastic bits here. Basically, they just kind of pop together, go together with screws. And these are again the 3x10s. Make sure you got the right parts for the wheelbase you need. This kit is available with a couple other bodies. I believe they have a Mercedes G-Wagon and a Volkswagen Beetle for this. And I believe the Volkswagen Beetle uses the long wheelbase. I'm not sure about the Mercedes. Now to the little ones. They are keyed with the little pins to kind of help line everything up. Those two halves together. This slide down. They fit fairly snug, so. Squeeze them together a little bit, make sure everything is tight together. Alright, and that is the center part of your chassis. Now we can take our rear gearbox, and this slides right over there. Again, it fits fairly snug. Squeeze everything together again, make sure everything is fitting tight all the way around like it's supposed to. we can take our front gearbox and battery holder. Everything screws together there. This is where it can get a little bit tricky to start holding everything together. Make sure you don't over tighten these. You don't want your chassis flying apart out on the trail. That could be kind of ugly. Hold on to. There we go. All right. There is the basic chassis all together. Front, rear. Now, once again, this is where our wheelbase comes into play. We get into step 17. This is gonna, it's the same really. No matter which wheelbase you're using, short, medium, and long, is the drive shaft that goes between the two gearboxes. It is this long metal rod here. Now, the only thing that changes between the short, medium, and long wheelbase is the length of this rod. The gears and everything on the end are going to be the same. And because I'm using the sealed ball bearing set, I have to flip back to the page 23 of the instruction book, and it shows here how the sealed ball bearings go on, because the ball bearings are slightly different than the nylon bushings that come with the kit. These have flanged bearings. Will rest in little grooves in the side of the gearbox. And you also have these little plastic spacers. These are part B2. They have a little step in them. It's very hard to see, but they're a little thicker around the inside diameter than they are the outside diameter. And you want to watch the instructions and make sure you point them in the right direction when you put them on. So we want to take a bearing, regular bearing, the spacers. We want to put the flange bearing first. You want the spacers with the thicker step facing the bearing. And then a little drive pin and a little tip, put a little grease in the hole for the drive pin. That'll kind of help hold it there so it doesn't fall out. It's just a little 2mm pin that slides on. And then your gear slides over that pin. And we want to do that to both ends and try to keep everything from falling off while we're doing it. Spacer again with the thicker side facing the bearing. Drive pin. And make sure the little pin slides all the way in the slot on the back of the gear. And then on the outside of that, we want another little spacer. And we want the little step facing out this time. And then another bearing. So a little step up in the little spacer is basically riding the inner race of the bearing. Okay, now we want to try to hold all that together. Set it aside for a second. We want to bring our chassis in. I'm going to take a couple of the tires here to kind of set the chassis on. Kind of hold it in place. Okay. I'm going to put a little grease in here and this little bevel gear that's sticking up. Alright. Now we want to take this shaft, drop it down in. You may have to wiggle things around a little bit. Make sure that it drops all the way down. That is seated down in there. Alright, I'm going to get some grease on these gears here. Be careful you don't knock the shaft out. Grease off our fingers. Back to the right page here. Step 18. little caps, parts A6. They have a little key that fits over a little boss on there, kind of locate them. Set that over that, pop it down, make sure everything still spins. And a couple more of the 3x10 self-tapping screws. Alright. Now, take our little drive cup again. Pop it in. Alright. Make sure everything is moving freely and everything feels good. You can see the shaft rotating, turning the rear gears. Everything feels good. Nice and smooth, no binding. That's the biggest thing. You want to make sure nothing's binding. That will burn up your motor and everything else if you got something binding in there. Alright, and next in line, we'll break open bag C next time, and that's where we get our suspension together, and it won't take long, and this thing will be wrapped up and ready to hit the trail. And that's where we'll pick up next time. So appreciate everybody watching. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free. I will respond. So until next time.